Are we good to begin? Dhruv sir? So, good morning everyone. This is our second session for day 5 of the induction week that is going on for the ADP students. We also have with us today the second year students attending this session. So, architect Madhav Joshi is an architect, urban planner, and the principal architect at Madhav Joshi and Associates. He leads the firm with a definite and holistic approach, guided by a minimalistic school of thought. He is the recipient of numerous prestigious awards celebrating his ideologies and design strategies for multifaceted work. He has a wide range of experience in designing hospitality buildings, high-end housing, corporate offices, IT facilities, retail destinations, campus planning for educational and research institutes, and master planning projects. He has conceived the master plan for the award-winning Heritage Residential School at Bnca Pune with areas for future growth. Site-responsive architecture, innovative construction techniques, and the use of locally available materials. And won Madhav Sir the Green Architecture Award by JK Cement in 2010, the Tata Tiscon Raise Award in 2012, and many more such accolades. Today he would be guiding us in the realm of form as a driving force in design development. I invite architect Madhav Joshi to kindly address the crowd. Thank you so much.
मला एक पावर ह्याच्यातनं घेता येईल ही कशाची होती पावर
ऑडिओ नाही ना काय हो HDMI
मी लावतो ते एक मिनिट हा तुझा काढून ठेवू आपण नको नको सर्क्युलर आहे ते Good morning. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Just give me 2 minutes. जेवढा अंधार करता येईल तेवढा करा. नाही, because some of the drawings do not have line weight which can be visible in a contrast ratio. आणि एक हे पण नसलं तरी चालेल ॲक्च्युली. नाही, मला नको आहे मला. हां, दिस इज बेटर. आणि तिकडचे पण थोडेच एखाद दुसरा ठेवा. हा नको आहे. हो, केला ना. हां, ओके. See, I want everybody to look at the screen. So, anyway, so thank you, BNCA, and the team who's behind organizing this event. I understand it's essentially focused at final year students who are in the process of sort of taking a final route to their thesis product, I would say. Personally, I feel it's little too short a time for you to sort of act upon. I guess you have about what, 3 months from today? 4 months. Okay, that's better. Uh, so now I know I just briefly talked to Kanchan what she was talking about, and I would like to sort of, anyway, there are a few overlaps that we would like to sort of stress upon in the course of deliberations, and I'll try to bring some continuity into that as well. But I must stress that the topic that you were sort of, exposed to, or it was discussed by Kanchan and presented with case studies, is the most important aspect of architecture. And to me and to you also should be that no architecture should be called good enough if it is not responding to energy conservation, sustainability, and in the realm of the new technology, the new materials, one has to be consciously doing their interventions, looking at interesting possibilities of using technology and materials to reduce the carbon footprint, bring sustainability, and also use energy in a very conscious manner. So today I'm going to talk about now the premise of the topic that I'm given is, I would like to debate for the sake of academics that would you really start a design process with a preconceived form in your mind? And I want some of the questions to be answered. It could be very interesting. Do you feel that form comes to your mind first, or what else? At least one or two responses. Who thinks about I want to do a building in a circle and start working on it? You must have done it once. Okay. So, no, that's, you see, there are fascination about certain forms, not only circle. There are certain forms you want to explore, and you have seen buildings not only done in a very orthogonal manner, but various shapes, and then they've been precedent set by famous architects like Zahadit and many other interesting and very creative architects, before us. So you also jump onto those possibilities. But what is important is the process which led them to adopt that possibility of a form, which is important, and that has to be that process has to be your own process. Not necessarily every form, every building has to have solutions or answers through very orthogonal arrangement. Arrangements could be any volumetric arrangement. When I'm talking about it, I'll need some garam pani. But this is also fine. Good. Yeah. So I was not well till yesterday, but now I'm fine. So when I say form, I'm not referring to a two-dimensional diagram of a plan. I'm just talking about the overall spatial experience that you would like to create. I have got, sorry, three examples. There are many one could bring on this discussion, but just for a simplistic reason, I'm going to share some of the projects that we've been working on. And recently we were asked to present prepare a lecture or a presentation on explorations and experimentation. So we sort of looked at our own work and started thinking which were the ideas, which were the points which sort of triggered those concepts, and those concepts which finally took whatever shape it took eventually. So we were actually trying to go back and trace down that thought process which prompted us to sort of took a path of a particular design which resulted in a particular form. Unfortunately, I haven't got one presentation today, but for paucity of time, I may not be able to talk about it, but that could have been very pertinent as well. But let me make most of it with whatever I have got today. So going forward. Now this is just introduction. It is still, yeah. This is our office logo. I know it resembles with Isola logo as well, but in a form like this. Ours is more like a plan. This connects me to a place in Mandu called Nilkant. Many of you may have visited Nilkant before, but what happens is, if you have to visit this place to understand what I'm trying to explain. This particular place actually defies all the notion about conventional architecture. That you approach a space, I wouldn't say a building, a space which you don't know where you're going. And if you're not told where you're going, it becomes a wonderful sequence of surprise. because you approach it from up the hill and you walk around the hill and then you come very oddly from this side, only to realize that there is something built into this space. So, and it's more like a negative space, it's more like a courtyard where these pavilions around it are constructed in the pocket of a hill. And then there is a wonderful sequence of water, spring water coming down. It stands still on this pool, and this is a spillover of it, and then it goes out with a gomukh and all into the valley. But this space actually connects to a interesting valley view. This was essentially a leisure pavilion. That's my take on it. People call it, it was some sort of a religious thing, but it was a leisure pavilion for the King Baj Bahadur. There are two other pavilions which are for entertainers, so to say. I mean, maybe some uh, music people will be performing there and things like that. But this particular motif connects me to this entire spatial experience, and that is the power of form, which is not there in terms of the built. It is actually what is not built is sort of defining what is around it, and that's one notion that we strongly believe in our office, that unbuilt defines the built. And there's a urban design lecture that we had prepared once, which actually dwells upon this notion that unbuilt defines the built. Because just to take a detour, uh, where not to build, that's the first decision one has to take. The design does not mean you have to design objects. I mean, what not to do is also equally important and a very strong design idea. So, and it can be elaborated at a city level. You can see, I mean, all the city squares or the street spaces are the ones which were decided to be left open, and therefore the city grew around it and it keeps changing around it, but the street remains forever. So that what not to build is a very important decision, and that is also true in form making. I mean, if you are really want to sort of think about a form, think about any vessel which potter makes. When you decide to make a matka, you are actually thinking about the void inside it, and what is going to contain that void and for what purpose decides the shape of that pot. So if you look at every simple pot, any object which we use, it is actually driven by its function. Look at the bucket. Bucket, you want to do it a conical shape so that you can pour and empty the bucket in as efficient manner as possible. It's not a cylindrical, it opens out. So like I mean, cup and bashi, I mean, why that cup needs a bashi? You know, you just think about it, because it's hot, so you have to hold it on your hand, palm, and then you have to chaha punkun paisa, so the surface area is increase and all that. So everyday objects that we use has a function related to it, and then when you find it so obvious, and that is how it should be for architecture as well. I mean, any form should be very obvious for that function if it at all you want to sort of adopt it instead of sort of forcing it to. Sorry, I missed very important. So this you must have read. I mean, this is one of the inspirations that one takes. To be modern is not a fashion; it is a state. State means state of mind. It is necessary to understand history, and he who understands history knows how to find continuity between the that which was, that which is, and that which will be. This is what Corbusier always talked about, and one has to interpret these sayings by masters in your own way. I come from a place called Y. You must have heard about place, the name of the town. This is the first temple town on River Krishna. Now, what has that to do with architecture? Yes, of course, there are a lot of interesting historical buildings. The cityscape, the townscape is wonderful along the ghats, and your childhood, having spent your childhood there, you have seen and observed so many processes, such as a mason building walls, uh, carpenters doing carpentry on the street side, or maybe a blacksmith doing things, utensils for the farmers there, and there are technologies which prevailed in those times, but objects were being made out of those hands and tools. So there is a lasting impact of those processes. Similarly, you know how the buildings are built from in a conventional manner, and of course there's a profound impact of, I realize, sorry. So, and there's a profound impact of the space that you grew in. Maybe it your school, maybe your waterfront ghats, or various waterfront areas, or the river itself. And you don't know, everybody has that profound background of their villages or wherever they have grown, not necessarily in villages, but there are lots of learning, and this is what I refer to when I talk about read about the history. It's not history in the sense of what happened 500 years back or even before that. History of your own lifetime, history of your observations and history of your learnings. Maybe it's through trekking, maybe it's through visiting certain places during your trips and tours. So there is a lot of information you have with you. You have to just decode and bring it out and deploy it for a particular purpose, and that will happen, that will come to you very naturally when a situation occurs like that. And this is one of the cases that I would like to present. And in order to tell you how a form was decided in a way. So I'm going to discuss 3 different projects. The first project is a large mixed-use development, which is an urban design project called Business Bay and the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Essentially, it is designed as a workplace, of course, associated with a 5-star luxury hotel. Then I'm going to talk about an institute which is a precinct within an existing campus, the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology. And thirdly, of course, Zostel Pachgadi, which was designed by Anubha. So let's go back here. Why? गणपती घाट, डोल्या गणपतीचं देऊळ, मधली आळी, गंगापुरी, and how, I mean, can things get any beautiful than this? And this still exists. So if you just go there, sit down, and you are obviously tempted to draw a sketch or two. And this is where we have grown up. We used to go to Gangapuri to swim, and in a good season when there is a moderate flow of water, we would just jump at the Gangapuri Ghat and just come down to and come out at Ganpati Ghat and things like that. Experts would do even more adventurous things and go and jump from the bridge and so on and things like that. So we know Chappa Chappa and Kona Kona of this town, and we have sort of imbibed the scales that we lived in. We understand what materials the entire fabric was built with. Now, why I'm talking about this here? Can you see this tall stone walls which are there? And the reason behind it, all these like buildings are like perched upon a tall stone walls, solid retaining walls. Reason? Yes, floods. Rivers, before the dam was built, they would flood, and then you'd want to protect where you stay from the flood waters. And over the periods, the data people have accumulated, and they know, I mean, the water wouldn't rise about XYZ level. And that wisdom has, prompted them to build these walls. And of course, it is still relevant because occasionally there are heavy rains. This still are useful obstructions for protecting the livable areas. Now, this idea, when I was designing a very urban space like in on Yeroda Road, this entire project that I'm going to talk about. So can you see some similes in this? There are some similarities about it. Now here, it's not that I decided, okay, this is why, this is that, and I just take this and plant it there and then I have a solution. It doesn't happen that, because you are questioning certain issues and you're just trying to gauge what are your responses and what interventions, physical interventions in terms of what needs to be built can yield results which are desirable. Now here you can see this retaining wall or a high podium wall which is built in stone. There also it was stone. See, to me, floods here are the traffic noise and the traffic itself. So I wanted to protect my workplace, which is a destination in itself, and you want to make it urban, which has to have some qualities, being in urban situation and accessible but tranquil, and also full with all the facilities workplace requires, so that they don't have to come down onto the street. So this was my response, to sort of perch it up, like protect it from the flood of the traffic and the noise and the clutter what goes on the street. And this is a very dynamic space. The flood level rises, now there is a flyover, the flood has risen, the sound has again gone up. So that was the response to that idea. And then perch up all this, place all these fragile elements, fragile in the comparison with the stone, like you saw brick walls and the wood structures in case of Y. Here you have a metal and glass structure which are delicate and lighter compared to the robust pedestal which is this podium. So that was the sort of a reference. It sort of came to you, and then you started thinking about it, how you can deploy this. Secondly, there was also another important issue, that when you are doing such upmarket workplace, which was supposed to have a very luxurious retail and a luxurious hotel there, the entire footfall here was, I mean, is of a particular economic class. And if you, I mean, in the next slide, you will realize it is situated, surrounded by certain institutional areas, the golf course, and it is juxtaposed with very diverse and contrasting realities of urban life. And this is, you have a very settled old Yeroda slum and parts of it. So you are actually doing something in the middle of all this context. This can associate with golf course very much. It can associate with institutional and office buildings very well. What about this? Normally in the urban design studio, you talk about creating a public realm and create space for people and give it back to the city. But here that notion had to be sort of revisited, because by creating a retail which can only survive the economies of this nature, had to be again a high-end retail. If I had to put it on the street, or eating places for that matter, which can cater to the working class which is going to work in this area. So, and that would have sort of created even greater tension, greater distance between the two socio-economic situations there. So the response was to remain silent about it, because that's, as an architect, how you can respond to it. Not create something and just to be ticking mark of very commonly talked about urban design interventions. So every time, whenever you want to create a public realm, you have to be very conscious about who's the end user of it and what is going to its social impact. And so that was another reason that one thought a raised podium with a very dead wall, a silent wall, could be a better response to that context. But this is something that probably developer wasn't interested in, and neither I told him that. But my story was about, I wanted to make it more poetic, more form oriented. Finally, that's a responsibility. I mean, doing a project like this in Pune, while with the advent of all the MNCs, this was a kind of a invited competition. And we took it as a responsibility rather than opportunity to do something interesting for our own sake. So this is the gateway to Pune. I mean, as you come from airport, I mean, you get to see this building, all the golf course, people, they have a wonderful view of it. So this becomes a landmark. This was to be a landmark anyway. So that brings even more responsibility onto you. How you respond to it, in the sense of how it should look in terms of form. That's the whole exercise about. Now, how much square feet? Can you see this? 23 lakh square feet of पॉटरला तुम्ही एवढा मातीचा गोळा आणून दिलात की त्याचं तुला पॉट्स करायचे. त्याचा उद्देश आहे की त्या पॉटमध्ये जाऊन लोकांनी काम करायचं, याचं वर्क प्लेस ऑफिस डिझाईन करायचं आहे तुला. आता त्या मातीचं तुम्ही काही करू शकता ना, छोट्या छोट्या पणत्या बनवू शकता किंवा अजून 10 भांडी एकसारखी बनवू शकता किंवा एक मोठं काहीतरी एवढं मोठं बनवू शकता. म्हणजे आय एम जस्ट थोडंसं वेगळ्या अर्थाने सांगतोय. पण आपलं चॅलेंज किंवा आपली जबाबदारी तीच असते की वेन यू आर आस्क्ड टू डिझाईन सो मच विथ such a mix of different activities, like where the component of hotel was to about 6 lakhs and remaining corporate offices and parking, everything retail was 17 lakhs. So this exercise is the crux of the whole process. That would you like to keep two towers and one this as a hotel and this as a office building? That's also a possibility, right? Like what you see in Pune, because the size plots are like that, you have to go taller and in order to achieve the targeted FSI. But here we took a very conscious decision. The prevailing regulations did not allow us to go beyond certain meters. Then you had this airport flying zone restrictions, and most importantly, we wanted to create a place which will look humane instead of intimidating. I mean, the landmark can be in a two-way. I mean, it can be just a tall and very aggressive tall building, and there is no limit to it, just to become satisfy the ego of a developer, maybe. But the more sensible way to create a landmark is that it should remain in people's mind. Though people who are going to work there and spend their day in working whatever 12 hours, 8 hours, whatever. So we took a conscious decision to sort of use the same volume in a horizontal manner. So it's very easy on eye. Then it can sort of contain a space. And most another important agenda was that in this entire thing, what you see there, the prominence of the hotel. Now, actually, if you look at the bulk of these two buildings, the hotel is like what, 1/3 of this entire bulk. But finally, that was the position a hotel had to take. It had to enjoy that prominence, being that important brand. And the workplaces are workplaces which had to be associated with this entire complex, and which we wanted to act as backdrop to the hotel building. You reduce the scale, you give prominence to the hotel because by its sheer size, it's not big enough to create its impact. But by doing the arrangement in a manner that it can achieve everything, that was the task at hand. And then you start exploring. This exercise is basically dismantling that. तो चिखलाचा गोळा आपल्याला किती छोट्या गोळ्यांमध्ये आपण करू शकतो, हा तो एक्सरसाइज आहे. And what you can make and how you can bundle it up so that the perception about the scale and volume is sort of reduced to a palatable limit. And then it has to be sort of juxtaposed with a balancing element like a vertical surfaces in the form of hotel eventually. And this was being thought about in 2006. Final arrangement is very simple. There's a 4-acre podium landscape garden which sort of binds all these 3 volumes together. These are almost identical offices. There's a plaza and the retail which was planned at the podium level, and it is accessible from the street and various ways from the parking level. This is the 3rd level of parking. 1 level is below the ground and 2 levels above the ground level. There's a ramp for the fire engine to go and access all the buildings. And then of course this is a hotel. I am not going to dwell too much upon the urban design sort of parameters of this, but the logistics of man and material movement or vehicular movement, we have gone ahead and also segregated vehicular movement into four-wheelers movement and two-wheelers movement. We always talk about only conflict between the pedestrian and the vehicles. But in the vehicles also there are categories. I mean, there are heavy vehicles, there are cars, there are two-wheelers. So we could sort of bifurcate those as well. And this was a render which sort of, as a result of it. So this is a 4-acre podium landscape which has got a couple of pavilions there, which were supposed to be fine dine pavilions. Now, and then hotel, office building, office building. Now, earlier sketches that you saw, we were just trying to bundle up, say, four floors together to make them look as if it's just one entity, so that the building looks very comprehensible, looks very simple, and you can sort of understand what's happening in terms of massing instead of cluttering it up with too many possibilities. And this gap actually provides space for common areas, cafeterias and refuge areas, which again becomes very logical for four offices to come down or go up at the mid-level and use that common facility. Or they can just come for the walk on the podium. And these are, so in terms of materiality, you will see stone being used only up to these areas, which we define as a pedestal or the podium, and the lighter materials are on top of it. These two pavilions, which were initially designed as a fine dine pavilions, now one of them is converted into a gym. Abs gym is there. Anuba designed this entire gym and a creche there. And then here we are doing a Lebanese fine dine restaurant. And just below that, which was earlier supposed to be the biggest nightclub of Pune, is going to be converted into a seminar center. It's more of a conference center. So, yeah, I mean, that's another aspect. I mean, your buildings had to be adaptable to changing needs of urban life. This is a very interesting story. Now, this why thing I was talking about since beginning when I was designing this, and there was a point where we wanted to bring in a landscape architect to sort of work on this project. And client and when the team from Marriott Design House, they decided, I mean, they realized that, the kind of architecture that we are doing can be best complemented by one architect from Lebanon. And then they were keen that both of us sort of get along and, do something together. Now, his name is Vladimir Durovic. We have given due credit to him. Landscape design by VDLA, Vladimir Durovic Landscape Architecture. So we met, he liked our projects, he saw some of our other projects like Heritage School and other projects, and then he realized that probably we are going to work with a like-minded office, and that's how we came about. And then he heard me out. I mean, he wanted me to tell you the story about this entire design, and then I talked about Vai profusely and told him like how ghats of Vai gets flooded in the monsoon, and then how we could approach ghats at various seasons, even if the water recedes. And that's what it's part of our life. Everybody, I mean, we don't find anything, we don't find any design about it, but actually it's a wonderful idea of approaching water, that access the edge of water and the land. It's very interestingly delineated in our cultures with help of ghats. And since it is part of our experience and life and the culture, we don't find something interesting to pick some ideas from, and Vladimir did that. So, and he went back, and their practices work differently. They just go and shut the door for 3 months. They work on a concept and then come out with a concept which they are 100% confident that it will be the only thing that they have to. I mean, there's no concept 1, 2, 3. They'll just hit the bullseye basically. So This was a mosaic of glass that we were doing for reducing the heat gain, because after, I mean, there are lots of stories within this story, and that again adds to the articulation of a form. We wanted to do a second skin to this project in order to reduce the heat gain and create a shading device. But with the cost and maintenance issues, we did not sort of get that opportunity. So we shifted our strategy to create facade which with combination of fretted glass in order to bring the E value to a acceptable limit, so that you can reduce the load on the HVAC system at large. So this idea of creating a mosaic of glass was there, and different opacities and transparencies of glass was something that we had introduced. So I'll just go back, maybe some of the, you can you can see this, which was the result of that conscious attempt to bring some character to the glazing, and this was the first time it was being done in India. So Vladimir actually replicated this idea onto the horizontal surface, creating opaque and transparent surfaces, mimicking what's happening on the facade. And then he also added a dynamics of monsoon when some of these areas are supposed to get flooded. And the floods go away, it will comes back to this. And this he has done only for this project, and he told me that he's not going to repeat this concept because he doesn't want to do this same thing again and again. So this is inspired by Vaighat narratives and of course what is happening on the building, and that's why it looks very obvious for this entire thing, because it's made for each other kind of a situation. So moving on from that, and that's the landscape finally, it's getting established. And it's a forest in between now. So if you were to sit there and just draw a few sketches, few lines, probably you will just draw a few horizontal lines and just balance them with some vertical lines. And that's the whole exercise was all about. I mean, if you take any frame, you will always have something to balance that given frame. And then when the form come together, they have a conversation going on. And this is the palette of elements which go on the articulation of that form. Moving on to, I just split hotel and the office area separately so that you understand. There was again, this was part of a same exercise, same flow, but sketches have been presented separately. Here you can see office buildings are at the backdrop, and you're exploring how this mass is going to respond to this. The different arrangement, you can see it's not split yet. So I was in that process of whether to split it further, stagger it further, and then even this had to be staggered. So these are like scaled down in terms of height, although in terms of sheer building bulk, they are thrice this volume. But since this was positioned at the street corner, this was supposed to enjoy that prominence. Now, these are like subconscious or conscious strategies just to sort of balance these lines, juxtaposing them in that overall composition of volumes and masses. There is a legibility about this form. All these are public areas, and from here you start the guest floors. Material wise also, of course, there are some MEP areas at the top, but these areas are articulated in order to their functional requirement and the connect with the outdoors. And numerous interfaces of different materials and elements coming together. And everything has to be resolved in a manner that it looks complete. on this project, after the office buildings were over, there was a gap because of certain recessional issues with the market, and the hotel did not take off for quite number of years. And during that process, Vladimir could not continue. So we were entrusted with the responsibility of doing the landscape design for the hotel part of it. So we took over the landscape of hotel, architecture and landscape of hotel, of course. So this is something which is built there, including the outdoor furniture, cabanas, everything. So Vladimir had not worked adequately on this, but since the language of their office and our office resonates with minimalistic lines, we could carry out that responsibility. Some grills and cocktail bars, which are quite popular these days. Now this is again, this is not designed by us, but this is designed by a Japanese architect. It's an extension of a Japanese restaurant, Yukio, and then some views of the property from outside. So you talk about the form, taking inspiration from my old town, and so there is nothing international about it. Normally it's you and the subject and the context and your understanding about what you are expected to do. So your sensibilities have to be sort of tuned to the different possibilities with help of the materials and the technology at your disposal. This is the porch. We were working with a lighting consultant from England, London to be precise, called DPA. And we presented this lighting concept to them, and they were happy to accept it readily. They gave a wonderful suggestion to line it up with some copper metal insides, and they designed the luminaires, the intensities of the light fixtures and all that. But this linear idea was also part of our architecture. Yeah, and a few snaps. And that's how it comes together. Okay, that was just one project, sorry. Now, I know Kanchan ma'am mentioned about this project. High Performance Computer Center and Center for Climate Change and Research at Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, Pune. Here we realized that we are supposed to do a master plan for this 50-acre campus, but there was master plan was more about infrastructural corrections and facilitating future growth. And then of course we were supposed to design two buildings which we took as let's look at these two buildings as a precinct within the existing campus, and that's how the title was coined. And this is like a second-year climatology textbook. Everybody has. So when I talk about history, like what Corbusier mentioned, so history is this as well, because your understanding about staying in an old mud house in some village, because it has a thermal mass, you feel comfortable, you feel warm in winter. Courtyard house, facilitating wind movements. So all these learnings, I refer there as a history of your learning basically. And there was an opportunity to sort of deploy all that understanding into a project. Now, a climate consideration or climate responsive architecture, how it sort of leads to determination of a form. That's another way to sort of approach a form. You don't preconceive it, and the simplest solution could be a simple rectangle if you understand the sun path movement, and probably you would want to respond in the least invasive manner as possible. invasive in the sense of what's around in the context. Here we were lucky to have a very large empty plot, so we could have probably taken any shape that we wanted. Uh, so instead of doing self-shading volumes of a close-knit fabric, we decided to deploy certain elements on the envelope of a building to create, reduce the heat gain. So anyway, I mean, this was a campus. We did some infrastructural road networks and all that. This is a residential campus. We decided to have two more residential clusters, and then of course this institutional precinct for two new buildings. And so this was the premise on which the entire architecture was set forth. And to me, I mean, this is the way everybody should adopt, come what may. The project objectives are, you have to respond to the climate and come up with interesting possibilities. So here we summarized what this project is all about. I hope you can read it out, or let me sort of run through. The building design of HPCCI and CCCR is synthesized from four considerations: converging the formal vocabulary with that of passive climate control. Now, when you are talking about vocabulary, ultimately you are referring to the ultimate expression with respect to its form and architecture, expressing the functional duality as two separate yet unified blocks, because each of these buildings had two distinct functions. One had to be the office areas or the research areas. Another one was in a place for housing a supercomputer. And both these buildings have that similar requirement, but it had to be executed for different entities, the different research groups within the institute. Articulating a controlled contemporary expression in response to Pune's institutional architecture context. That's also another responsibility. Finally, if you are designing a building for an institute, you have to be aware of what you are doing in terms of architecture, and whether it's going to contribute significantly into the overall context of architectural milieu of Pune. Finally, and most importantly, the final year student need to give some attention to this. Integration of critical services from master planning to building design, ensuring effective serviceability. आपण MEP म्हणतो आणि त्याच्याबद्दल फार काही करत नाही. पण या बिल्डिंग्सना तुम्हाला जर ते बिल्डिंगच्या भिंती पाडून परत त्यांनी काहीतरी मॉडिफिकेशन करायला नको असतील, तर यू हॅव टू plan the service in a manner that it can be serviceable in times to come. And this building has proven that approach. 75 teraflop computer hardware was replaced after a few years by some huge capability racks without breaking a single wall. So that redundancy, that planning, that serviceability was designed in the building. And when you call a building which is more for institutional buildings are supposed to live longer, I mean, compared to commercial buildings, and they are going to adapt to different set of requirements, changing requirements. So form is about achieving all that as well. Then this is just to sort of continue what Kanchan ma'am must have said, like, how to reduce the heat gain by landscaping. So you have to sort of talk about the unbuilt spaces in between, how they need to sort of be looked at also. Plans are very simple. The courtyards or the arrival. So in this building we realize on a campus that a building does not, not necessarily every building has to have a front elevation and a rear elevation and side elevation. Because on a campus like this, you can approach the building from any direction. If you are coming in from the residential side, you would come from whichever side you are, So the elevation, for that matter, or the facades, whatever you call it, they have to respond to the climate, which direction it is facing. So here what we did, it's a simple strategy of adopting a rectangular form in order to reduce. Why rectangle and why not square? Because rectangle can give you two shorter sides and two longer sides, and two shorter sides will be more appropriately oriented towards east and west to reduce your heat gain. The radiation of sun is maximum from east and west, and therefore you want to create shorter walls, and that's how the form started shaping. And then furthermore you can make them cavity walls, add some n- not so usable support areas like toilet blocks, storerooms, and create a buffer, thermal buffer, and protect the main usable areas. So very simple strategy. If you look at the plan, there is a absolute legibility about the entire thing, what's happening. You can understand which are the servant spaces and which are the served spaces, like Luikan would say. And there's an atrium to sort of facilitate cross ventilation. And this is all the elements which go on the building, the created to shade the building facade in order to reduce the heat gain. One of the buildings we actually also installed with radiant cooling, which was mentioned in earlier presentation. Uh, it has got all the parameters, all the characteristics of solar passive architecture with respect to shading device, orientation and shape. But in addition, we had also deployed what is called radiant cooling and earth tunnel system in order to supply fresh air. And this is how the pre-cooled air is pushed into office areas. So I won't dwell about, too much on how it is designed. These are radiant cooling pipes embedded into the slabs. These canopies actually create deep shadows in the summer sun. Or you can articulate those vertical fins to sort of harness the wind. Roof parasol to shade it from the top. And the permeability of this entire mass or the form is achieved at the ground level, because in a campus your traversing routes are at a ground level and you can come from one building to another building, and that should happen with ease and the sense of continuity into it. These are the west side walls, which is cavity walls. So you wanted to have a tower for fresh air supply. Then this was done in a phase one. This was done in phase two. But you have already decided on the overall vocabulary of materials and detailing. The language was already set, and together they create a form, the experience. It's not about just one creating a spatial experience for one building. It's about the campus. So this idea about form sort of escalates and becomes even more complex and dynamic when you're dealing with a campus situation. Use of daylight in the atrium, and also it helps to sort of cross ventilate the volume. That's the quality of daylight you get. That's all daylight. So if you just discussing form, it's just a pure rectangle, but it has got a purpose to it, and how it has been sort of arrived at, that's what we were trying to understand. So wake up, guys. It's hostel time. So being a millennial, Anubha was the driver of this project, and a lot of brilliant ideas were brought to the studio when she came back from US. Of course, we were already working with the program with the client, and we were toying this idea about using containers or any other precast modules which could be manufactured in the factory and transported there, and all those possibilities. The site was very challenging. It had a very steep slope, but the whole objective was to capture the views in the valley, which is below Pachgani area, and the site was very compact. So we had to achieve certain number of packs who are going to stay there. Hostel format, I mean, they have bunker beds, dormitories, and also some private rooms. And it's for a particular age group from 18 to 40 years only. So the project brief was quite clear, although they wanted to have more number of people staying there, but site could offer only about 80 odd numbers could be accommodated here, and how we could achieve that. So with that program on one side and a very difficult site where we could actually put for not a single step could be put in, even before we level it. So it was sudden drop from the roadside. Now, although it was decided that some modular objects had to be used, we deliberated on the possibilities in terms of logistic, handling, everything. Container was, of course, a very interesting choice. Nobody had done it before so profoundly, or so. So we decided to adopt that, and let's see how the entire process of form making happened. So if that is the topic, let's go that way. So every project we try to capture in a one-liner or a one sentence or some few words. Like earlier you saw present in the campus. Earlier you saw urban workplace. Now this is going to be a cascading energy. Cascading energy means it's obviously about the youth, and cascading implies it's on a physical terrain which is, have that cascading possibilities. So it has metaphoric references as well, and the users, so the millennials really live that notion here. It's part of a existing village fabric, like a gram panchayat area, and that's how they could get some sort of a permission to build there. There are some existing so-called quasi permanent structures, or hotels are there, and then there are this was proposed there. If you look at the fabric of this, it's like this. It's all smaller components, very fine grain, low rise. Materiality wise, it's all patrachi ghara kiya patracha roof particularly, and in a intervention sense, we are also continuing the same character of the built into the new campus. Now you must have noticed the contours, entire region. It's all paddy fields. Of course, deliberately taken a black and white picture here because we wanted to focus on the position of the site. But this landform was something of very importance. Ultimately, you had to intervene into that kind of a geography. And then you have seen similar geographies in the world, in India also, where human intervention using tools and implements which are not mechanized can result into scales which are very humane. I mean, there could be terraces which are like 7 feet, 8 feet high maximum. And this is the way to create a usable set of terraces which can be sort of cultivated upon. So these learnings, or even if you call that this learning of, or this history of, how humans have been sort of intervening into the landform, comes as one of the possibilities on the design board. Similarly, you look at the virgin land forms like this, where the nature sort of, with the angle of repose of the soil, stabilizes itself, creating some interesting walkways, if you want to call them. So, okay, anyway, a few slides are missing. And then I'm just trying to put together some of the references which are part of your learning as a history, as a growing up, and understanding how mankind intervenes into the nature. Like these Sherpas, what a fabulous reality. It's very challenging terrain climate-wise, and also look at the just of Pagdandi. The only contact of this entire volume is just these 2 feet there, and they are balancing this whole odd-looking volumes on these 2 legs here, and also it's a dynamic because they're just climbing up or climbing down. Now, this tells you something. I mean, this is, I mean, you have to understand how this happens. And in a situation where you have a very less opportunity to create a footprint, but you want to carry so much volume on you, and that is was the situation was that we had a less than half an acre, and you wanted to accommodate 80 people to stay there. These images came handy as a trigger of a possibility. So we thought we could have a lesser footprint but bigger volume precariously balancing on top of it, and that was it. And possibilities started coming in. You have to stack it up, you have to make it balance, you have to stabilize them, and still make it interesting, make it livable, and not to forget the views which are going to be in abundance in the valley. Because although you don't see in that location the water backwaters, but you see a wonderful play of shadows of the clouds, birds flying by, the seasons changing the skylines, skyscape, and different qualities of light during the day and during the seasons. And you can see rain coming from one direction and going away in another direction. So this entire valley view is full of dynamics. So something is happening, and you really don't want to miss any of those situations. So everybody deserved to have that view. That was another challenge. And then some of these explorations happened. Going back to the paddy field strategy, that you create terraces, and of course in a ghat like this, you never negotiate a ghat in a straight line. You have to come in a manner like this. And in during that process, what happens when you are taking a ghat, you are actually exposed to different positions of views. So it is not any boring. I mean, you have a very dynamic, the entire serial vision experience is very dynamic, and you wanted to create that as well. Create footprints, places you can have this narrow and long footprints of containers can be housed there, and just enough space in front of them. Likewise, and then put all these more containers on top of it. So this was the whole strategy of how the form came about. So you can traverse in between, you can see, you can traverse in between these areas, and in the process, when you take a turn, come down, and you're walking in this direction, you are actually, by design, you are going to get a view through these two containers. So you don't feel claustrophobic within these spaces. These spaces which are not actually built upon are the soul of this entire experience. And then again, I would like to say the unbuilt actually defines the built, because these are the places from where you get to experience what's around you. And these are the places where you just throw your rucksack and you come down with your guitars or whatever, campfire time. So these spaces are very living rooms of that entire. So in a project, normally there are listed spaces, but there are non-listed or non-programmatic spaces. As a designer, you have to see through those possibilities as well. Which are the areas which ought to be there, but they are not listed as something to be built. And this is how you unfold the plan. I mean, this is an entry from the roadside. This is one pavilion, which is a reception pavilion. Come down is a common area. So we had to construct this one slab in order to make this whole thing possible, and then make terraces. There are few trees which are existing trees we had to sort of respect. Everyone gets the view. Now something else, when this was installed and up and running, we did not find a solution to provide a weather shade to the door. We tried all the possibilities, but nothing came which to our mind which was going to work. and we didn't want to do a huge fabricated contraption there because it would have been very heavy. It's physically not possible to attach a metal structure onto this. Then we decided, I mean, we discussed a lot and realized that, we are using all the materials and all the products which are used in a transportation industry, like containers. We also use the graphics the way that, transporter, I mean, I'll show some pictures there. So the idea came that why not use a tadpatri to make a canopy out of it. It's like a cap. It's made out of a tadpatri or some Teflon kind of a fabric. It's a very simple pipe structure which is sort of attached, just hooked on to that area. And that was added later on, and it works fine. These are the private rooms on the top. These are the dormitories for 6 persons each. There are 2 dormitories within this box. This is for 2 people, and with some standout balcony. And again, in the transport segment, you see all these containers with a lot of information. So we converted that idea into private room for 2 people, maximum payload, how many kgs, container, then balcony maximum 2 persons, blah blah blah. And then we also added AMSL. What is that? Anyone? AMSL. Google gives you coordinates. So this is above mean sea level. So when you are like a hiker and a trekker and you are just going places, it's good information to know, no, that at which level you are standing. So anyway, all these things add to the whole experience. And this is how it unfolds in the evening. Bhadipa was there to launch. I mean, that was when they started. The kickstart was with their thing. Yeah. See all these rooms. That's steel again. It's a steel balcony which is actually a weather shade to that big opening, but it serves enough for 2 people to take a chair and have a cup of coffee. Look at these guys. Now the inspirations come from anywhere. These are family of meerkats, perpetually vigilant about what's happening around them. Like you have to be in the hostel. You don't want to miss a thing happening in the valley. You don't want to miss that fantastic play of sun coming through the clouds and falling shadows on the valley floor. And there are so many things. So you have to be very attentive and just look towards where the action is. And that's what they do in this forest and desert. And that's what happens here. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me at the back? Okay, great. Thank you so much, sir. We didn't have place, so we were all sitting outside and listening on the live streaming.
Oh.
There are a lot of students sitting on the ground floor and in the classrooms listening to the live stream as well. So I think almost all classes are called off right now and everyone was listening to the lecture across the college.
Wonderful.
I think it was a wonderful lecture. I can see the smiles on everyone's faces. It's very rare that after a lecture gets over, the students are smiling and they've been excited about something. First of all, 5th years, I'd like to start. If you guys have anything that you would want to ask, sir, regarding the presentation or regarding whatever you've been thinking for the last 1 week and discussing with the review panels. upstairs, anyone? Yeah, yeah, you can sit.
No, I'm fine.
Sure?
I'm fine. Yeah, I can just reach the mic very easily.
Yeah, Shruti, yeah.
Yeah, obviously, what we are looking here today is the end product. But when there was nothing on the site, there were few other things were also on the site. Like there were some trees with a heavy heart. They had to be sort of removed. Our first option was to work around the trees. There were some nice and beautiful old trees on that campus, but when uh, when we drew up that concept first, we were looked upon as some activists doing something. So we had to sort of change our approach because we realized that the trees are going to go eventually. But with that much sincerity, the developer and the entire team, the investors, decided to create the garden which is on the podium, and they just wanted to go with the best of the possibilities in terms of what it takes in terms of expenditure or ideas, and that's how uh, we sort of were looking at some good architects to work upon on that. So we you cannot replace a tree in that sense, but at least that green cover is there, and I'm really happy to see some uh, birds amidst those uh, simple looking boxes. So there is a life into that space again. So, so that was one possibility we worked upon. Second possibility was, of course, as an exercise, we were exploring different volumetric propositions for functional ease also, like this idea about tall tower is again can be a very practical solution in a situation where the land is such. But here we have we had a choice of spreading it in a horizontal manner. And another aspect came into picture was the phasing. So that's also another important consideration for deciding about the form. Do you really want to do a mega structure, or you want to do a fragmented structure? That has to be a very informed decision. It cannot be just a choice what मला हे करायला आवडेल. It's not that kind of a thing. It has to be sort of put on the table. And the phasing was another aspect. I mean, they didn't want to sort of wait for the entire construction to happen so that they could lease out the thing. That was also another thing. Of course, that was also vetted against a tower building. And if you see what is happening in Mumbai, even the tower is going up, and the construction on the top floor is going on, they are still fitting out the lower floors and they're occupied. So it is a possibility in that situation as well. But here they chose that they would construct the one building first, second building, and next, I mean, as a phase two, and so on. So it was essential to sort of break down that mass into three different structures. One for functional reason, Ritz Carlton has a different function, and Office Tower has two separate identical functions. But when, as an architect, we decided to take that into our hands in terms of the experience, that was a deliberate attempt to sort of break it down further so that the scale can be brought down to a more palatable shapes and sizes. And that is where the whole proposition gets even challenging and interesting. So there were quite a few possibilities. IITM, again, the entire plot was empty. There were not restrictions as such, but you take a route of solar passive architecture. You decide a simplest response to reducing heat gain is a rectangular shape, and there's something like basic ABC of solar passive architecture, nothing complex. So you exercise those choices. Then why that shape and size? That would that be the only way to go about a solar passive architecture? No. there are deeper layers into your thought process which are not linear processes, which come to you and some come to you from above. I mean, like a divine intervention. You don't know what happened. So that's another aspect. But here we thought, I mean, the kind of architecture we would like to offer to the group of scientists, and this, they are all students of physics. So they go to the minimal realization, minimal things, the purest way of understanding about our being in a way. So we didn't want to do anything which is extraplus, very bare, very austere, and so the character of that architecture represents what it is, for whom it is made for. So there are these processes which can be discussed and debated, but that's how we sort of approach it from multiple directions, and that will also that has to be a very conscious methodology. I mean, for whom you're doing and what are the choices that I have. Do I do a playful architecture which could be even energy efficient and solar passive, or I do something which is more austere, more stable, more serious looking piece of work? It's your choice.
Of anyone else? Does anyone else, second year, third year, or faculty, anyone want to ask anything? Chaitanya.
Hello.
Yeah.
So about the Ritz-Carlton project, when we typically, students are asked to design large buildings, we always talk about, positioning blocks with respect to their orientation. Sun orientation and wind. At the same time, we also talk about facades responding to the directions, right? So when you design such large buildings, can you just talk about a couple of things where you
Yeah.
talk
See,
about skin and how it behaves?
Uh, I presume the second project which I talked about, IITM, it's all about that. Okay, and if the market sort of permits, you can adopt that same very methodology for even commercial buildings. But commercial buildings come with different baggage altogether. That world has a very limited notion about what is international, and use of glass is something that is imposed upon you. Although you can still use it for advantages that it offers, brings in more daylight, but it needs to be shaded. So that if you're not allowed, again becomes a huge challenge. And more importantly, the orientation in order to reduce the heat gain can be mitigated by way of second skin. So that you are actually constricted in the commercial domain to exercise. But yes, I mean, their considerations could be different, because wind becomes a redundant aspect, because unfortunately it's a 24/7 your captive users of air conditioning. Cut to on IITM, you have the choice, 100% choice. Monsoon, you shut down the radiant cooling system, open the window, just turn on the fan on one or two, and you're comfortable, given Pune's climate. You don't have to be a sort of compulsive user of a air conditioned space. You're using 100% fresh air, and that's what was being talked about in all these COVID ASHRAE seminars, and that's the need of the hour. I mean, or the future. I believe that every office space should be designed in a manner which is there. Challenges are there. Flexibility has to be there, because there are certain precautions have to be exercised, because you can't drill into. But coming to your first thing, you don't have to impose this strategy of orient your buildings to this thing. They have been told in the second year, third year. They very much know about it. So they better do it the right way. They come and confront you and telling different challenges. Like, even if I know that I'm going to gain a lot of heat from if I'm going to face, say, west side, but there's a best view on that side. What do I do? And it was a situation in a smaller house which we had designed in the early stages, the best view was on the southwest and the west and northwest. So all the rain and sun, everything was going to sort of, then you respond through is your form evolution. You make a form, you make the roof form in a manner that it can extend beyond the envelope to protect it. And that's how the form becomes different. I'm talking about a house that we had designed for Rohan Builders, their farmhouse, which has got a very interesting shape and form, which was driven by these considerations. So you have to get a view on the west side, which is not the best side to sort of open up onto, and then you have to do other things in order to protect yourself. So all these challenges actually come with opportunities, and that's the whole game. And you have to look for these opportunities, some excuse, some opportunity to do something which is not done before. That should be the name of the game. So there is no sort of a textbook kind of a approach in that sense. You sort of are subjected to a situation where you can have very interesting possibilities and use that, leverage that into a new experimentation.
Anybody else who would like to ask?
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for the insightful presentation that you had. So while we cater to context in buildings, that be material context or people in general, how do we make the building still inclusive for every person who comes in there? Because they don't belong from the same context, one. And secondly, while we talk about the buildings being reused for another purpose later, but we have designed the building for a particular purpose while in the same context, how do we go about situations like these?
See, there are two aspects in your question. Let's look at the second aspect first, that using it for some other purpose. If that is the mandate given to you,
Generally we say, right, because the purposes change, the things change in future, we should design our buildings in a way
yeah, but there are so many possibilities. It's very important to sort of understand that, which is of course is a good approach to sort of deliberate upon right in the beginning, and look at a particular structure. If you're I'm just exaggerating the scale. If you're designing a factory, you cannot imagine that it's going to be like a residential block. It could be used as maybe a warehouse at the most, things like that. So in a reasonable manner, if you can extrapolate certain possibilities, you can still validly consider them while you are designing, but not give as much weightage as you would want to give for the purpose in hand at that moment. Okay, so that's a good approach to have, but you cannot be sort of open-ended in that sense. So, and there are possibilities like again, you have seen wonderful Soho small office, home offices, or wonderful art studios in factory spaces. Like Tate Modern is a wonderful example how the old abandoned power station is converted into a fantastic museum of modern art. So architects are full of ideas. So don't worry too much about how it is going to be used in future if that is not the mandate, because otherwise we'll be only discussing that aspect, giving lesser weightage to what needs to be done for the moment. Coming back to your first thing is that now I'm just sort of you can please see it, take it to a slightly different level. I strongly believe that in the profession of architecture, whenever we get a responsibility to design something, I'm saying responsibility. Of course, those are opportunities, but you have to look at them as a responsibility. Client, you, your team, everything just are there for that purpose. But what is going to remain beyond everybody's lifetime is the building and the site. So that context of the site and the building is more permanent than all of us are. So it brings in more responsibility to you, that you do something, intervene something on that, and just leave behind something which is worthy of some reference, some inspiration for times to come. So that's like that should be the bottom of everybody. Otherwise, if I just ask which buildings you like in Pune, probably you will have 5, 10. Why? Pune is full of buildings. So that's something I would like you to sort of take back with you and ask yourself, standing in front of the mirror or to your friend or peer, how my architecture is going to be different and how it's going to make the difference. So that's the what. And when you start thinking about it, you're actually going to think about the end users, who's going to come to that building and what expectations he's going to come up with. It doesn't have to be the same experience that he would have in a school building somewhere else. Like, for example, the heritage building that we had, heritage school that we had done, it was something which is lived his life, because unfortunately they operated for what, 15 odd years, and the whole organization sort of did not continue the school operations. Now it is repurposed differently. There's a wellness center in some, there is another, there's a school for challenged young kids there. So I just visited last week and I find it's still being repurposed wonderfully. And the faculty there, who, like all the handicapped children, everybody, challenged children, they were so happy running around in those spaces. Wellness people were so happy that they got the thermal comfort and the tranquility that they have. So the purpose will find the appropriate spaces. So you don't have to worry too much about it. A smart way of doing is like, I'm not taking names, but some of the IT companies have a deliberate strategy to build their infrastructure in the cities. Come the time where the IT segment goes down and there are no people working in, they can at least lease it out to commercial spaces. Instead of Hinjawadi is going to be a ghost town in that situation. So these strategies work at a different level, but it's a worthy approach. I mean, even if you want to consider, do consider it in a very sort of, limited way in the sense.
Would anybody else? We'll take one final question, please. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to call upon the ADP team on stage also, and as well as architect Rajiv Raze, please, to felicitate sir, being the most senior of all of us here.
Rajesh sir was my thesis guide. So the whole thing comes to full circle. Thank you so much. It's an honor. We have had a long
We're not surprised that Rajesh sir is the most popular thesis guide that the students want. Every other student has come and said that we want to do our thesis with Rajesh sir. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time. I know it's a working day, and I'm so glad that all these experts are coming and talking to our students right in the beginning of the thesis week. I hope this is giving you some insight into what sort of projects, what sort of scales we are dealing with, and the scales we are encouraging.